course. So we do have comic books based on both the Dragon Age and the Mass Effect IPs, and they're here today to talk a little bit about not only writing the characters in the games, but how the characters they write for the comics affect the games. So if you guys would like to come up and take some stage.
Hello.
And so they're going to talk a little bit, and then if any of you have any questions about the comic books, anything like that, they're happy to answer questions at the end. After they're done, we're going to be moving into a demonstration of our upcoming Mass Effect 3 multiplayer content. So they're not going to be signing things here on the stage, but you're welcome to talk to them after the panel's over off to the side, and they will be signing things later this afternoon.
We're very friendly. All right, so...
Well, your comic's gone out, so...
Yeah, I guess mine has been released. Let's see, now the way this worked was we had a Dragon Age comic before that was with IDW, and nobody at BioWare was really involved with that one, so that when the contract ended, Dark Horse Comics, they'd done the Mass Effect comic for a while, and there was a good relationship. So they approached us about doing a Dragon Age comic as well. And they said that if we do that, we'd like somebody who actually writes for the comic, writes on the game to write for the comic. So they asked me if I was interested, and I was like, I've read comics since a very young age, and felt both well-prepared and ill-prepared to work on something like that. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. Especially when they said that what we'd really like it is if you bring back some of the characters that the fans are familiar with to star in the comics and sort of continue their own adventure. And I missed Alistair. So I definitely wanted to have an adventure that centered on him and had a little bit of an adventure. I really wish I could have brought the warden with him, but apparently it breaks people's brains if I included a canonical warden, so that couldn't happen. But it was great to sort of revisit some characters that I've written in the past. I wrote the original Alistair for Dragon Age Origins. I didn't write Isabella or Varric, but they were two characters from Dragon Age 2 that I really loved, and having the three of them together seemed like a union of fun and awesome. So it's actually been a really fun experience working on the comic.
Close. Good morning. So I worked on the Tally Homeworlds comic, which will be coming out soon, and so it's interesting when, changing from writing for video games, where we have an interesting, we have a set of rules. We have, no more than this many lines between, before the player gets to make a choice. No more than this many characters per line, that kind of thing. So moving to comic books was both similar and also, very, very different. Just a different set of standards. Very few, how many words you can fit per panel, how many panels you can fit per page. And although I, grew up reading comics, it was, enough of a new thing that, in our case, John and I both work with a scripter. So we outline the story. In my case, the story is Tally before the events of Mass Effect 1. We didn't want to do something that took place after Mass Effect 2, because we didn't want to write something where, if you got Tally killed on the suicide mission, we didn't want, and here's Tally going off on adventures.
So basically your choices affected the comics, right?
Yes, exactly.
Got her killed.
So we told Tally's story is the story of Tally on her pilgrimage in Mass Effect 1, just the early events of Mass Effect 1. So it was interesting working within the limits, but also the expanded opportunities of graphic novel form. Just being able to see, we can actually have this many cool ships, or we can have this many guys, on screen, so to speak. Whereas in a video game, we're like, no, anything more than 4, the engine breaks.
I got cloaks and horses.
Yeah. Whenever you're writing for the IP, it's you just want to make sure you don't break anything. oh, this is how our ships work. This is how biotics work. This is what how biotics don't work. And for Tali, it was really just keeping track of her voice and also remembering how much younger she was in Mass Effect 1 than she is in Mass Effect 3. Because over the course of the game, she really does grow and mature, and she's much more confident in by the time you get to the last game. And back in the events of the first game, she was definitely a little more chipper and had more to prove. So I think hopefully it's an interesting story. You can all tell me in a couple months.
Then following the release of the Tali comic will be the Garrus comic that I was involved in. And I remember when our boss, lead writer Mac Walters, came to us and said, up till now they've been doing comics that were, let's say, story-based, right? The story of Arion and Omega. But they wanted to go with focus on our characters, because now that we're wrapping up the trilogy, in many ways this is the way you'll continue to tell their stories and spend time with them. And for Garrus, as with Tali, there's always the chance. It actually gets more complicated with Garrus because there's the possibility that there's 5 people in the world who did not recruit Garrus in Mass Effect 1. So technically, to stick to canon, we don't know that really comic Garrus actually went and had all the adventures with you in Mass Effect 1. So we can say he was alive on the Citadel. He was probably aware of what happened. And then by default, he was in Mass Effect 2. He was alive. So we knew that, okay, he's our Archangel. So it was a matter of finding those little bits of backstory and history with these characters that we couldn't cover in the game, but we think people are still interested. So with Garrus, it's the story of how did he become Archangel? How did that all happen on Omega? What drove him to do that? How was it you ended up there finding this guy sniping people, left and right, all those mercs he was taking out? And one thing I'd introduced in NE3 was a bit of a relationship with his father, which is something that developed in Mass Effect 1. His dad was kind of a hard ass. You learn that in Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 3, there's a little bit of dialogue actually with his dad. And then I thought, well, the comic can explore that as well. So that there's an interesting relationship with Garrus we've never seen before. Which I think, it's the same thing with Tali. It's trying to find those moments that we alluded to, but we never really showed. And now that the trilogy's ending, the comics seem like the great way to move forward.
Yeah.
So, hopefully you'll enjoy it. If you do, there potentially could be more characters.
Awesome. So, more questions? Or?
If there's any questions.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, what you got?
I know that in the DLC, they're the Shadow Broker. It was mention of Garrus' sister and mother, and especially with the disease and that there's some problems back there. But it wasn't truly meant. I think he mentioned that one of a brother on Palva in Mass Effect 3. Can you?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So
the mother had the disease. If I remember right, it was similar to MS. It was neurological.
Right. Yeah.
And if Morden and Garrus were alive, he got help getting him treatment.
Yeah.
No, Garrus, if you look at one of the additional Shadow Broker entries, has Garrus talking. It doesn't have Garrus talking with Morden, but then it says, Mr. Vicarian, thanks for pulling strings with STG people, which is Morden. Garrus talked to Morden. Morden pulled some strings, and Garrus' mom got some treatment.
Yeah, and I can tell you that Garrus' mother does make a cameo in the comic, so
cool.
That should be hopefully enjoyable. Any other questions?
Yeah.
I was wondering about the collector base. The repercussions from that didn't really show up in 3 for me. So.
It did, and I wish it had been clearer. It was if you go through. So in the Elusive Man space, if you go through and the part where you said the remains of the dead Reaper. Now there should be. If you destroyed the base, there's a lot less of that Reaper, and if you save the base, it's much more intact. Then, in terms of your in-game options, if you destroyed the base, so the way it's set up is it's all based on your effective military strength.
Yeah.
If you destroyed the base, then the first option that becomes available to you is destroy the Reapers. And if you choose, and then when you reach the next tier of scores, then Control the Reapers becomes available, but it's a much suckier option. There's a lot more collateral damage to Earth as a result of you taking the suboptimal choice. Whereas if you did the other way, what did I say first? You destroyed, yeah. So if you gave the base if you gave the base to Cerberus, then then control the Reapers is available first, and destroy only becomes available later. It's one of those things where I think honestly, it's tough for us because we build the game for everyone. The people who go through and are the huge completionist, I do everything players, they've got a high enough score that a lot of times that might not be apparent to you guys. But yeah, if you'd saved it versus not, then and hadn't been a completionist player, hadn't done a lot of fetch quests or whatever, you would have had far fewer options available.
All right. I was wondering why at the end of the game, Joker left Shepard with no indication.
Okay, I'm going to step in here for a second, just because this panel, the idea of this panel was to discuss the comic books.
Saw that one.
We're happy to talk about the endings, and certainly we've already announced there is the extended cut that's going to be coming out this summer for free. That is going to address a lot of the concerns that the Mass Effect fans have, such as why did Joker leave the plan, why did he abandon Shepard, that sort of thing. We just can't, go ahead and say, oh, he did that because yet. Casey Hudson in the project, Pat and John would come down here and beat me if I, gave away the answers yet. We just can't really talk about that yet. Please feel free to come up with, or them when they're not on the panel and discuss, your concerns or anything. But if anybody has questions directly about the comic books, what it's like, if you have questions, I'm an aspiring writer. I would love to write for video games. I would love to write for comic books. Do you have any advice or tips? That's really kind of what they're here for today.
What I will say though is that Joker would never casually leave Shepard. It was not.
I think we can say safely that it will make more sense when you see the extended cut material.
Sure.
Is there ever going to be a collection released of all the comic books in 1 or 2 volumes?
Like an omnibus?
Something like that, yeah.
I think it depends on how much fan interest there is. It's something that I know we'd love to see. Mac has done so many great comics with Liara and with Arya and with Bailey, and assuming the Homeworlds comics.
Yeah, James is the first Homeworlds
Yep.
comics, then Tally, then Garrus, and we'll go from there. But
Yeah.
I
Cool.
would imagine.
I think it'd be
Because
great
that
to
would be
see.
awesome.
Like Homeworlds kind of thing.
Yeah, that would just be awesome.
I'm a huge comic book collector. I have about 58 long boxes now in my basement. Generally, the way a comic book company works is if single issues do really well, they love to bundle them together. So certainly, if the fan demand is there, I'll be buying it.
Cool.
Obviously, the great opportunity and the great problem you face writing for BioWare games is player agency. It's what you can do best and what you can do worst. What can you do in the comics that you couldn't do in the games because you don't have to worry about the player screwing things up? Do you see it as an opportunity to deliver your story as opposed to the player's story?
It's an opportunity to shed a little bit more light on characters that you no longer have to worry about how they exist in relation to the player, because really in the game it's all the player is the center of the universe, right? They're just little satellites, so it is a little bit different that they suddenly get to be the main character, so to speak. But I mean, in terms of agency, well, I guess it's just a completely different way of telling a story, right? In a way, it felt a little bit weird to step into a different role where you're not worrying about maintaining different paths, and it is just about setting out a story that is in itself interesting. So yeah, it was a nice little exercise.
That's it. The other thing for me, at least on the Tally side of things, is there are types of stories that you don't tell firsthand in the Mass Effect universe. Commander Shepard is always an awesome military badass, and the first thing she does is save a colony, and then go yell at the council. So with Tally, I can tell a story of coming to the Citadel and having people call her a soup rat and spit at her feet and refuse to serve her. And there's not a player there to step in and go, "Don't be mean to Tally," And it's like, because if you're the player, you always want to be able to do that, and you're annoyed if we don't let you do that. But really, in real life, that kind of racism does exist, and that's a story that is worth telling. And I think it makes, someone like, at least in Tally's case, I think it makes her stronger when you realize she didn't just traipse onto the Citadel and everyone was throwing flowers at her feet going, "Oh, Tally, we love you." It's like, well, no, they kind of thought she was trash. And that, it's just a different type of story.
Yeah, it's like a lot of our characters, when you meet Garrus on the Normandy for the first time in ME2 or 3, we have these investigate conversations where you can ask them, "What have you been up to, Garrus?" So essentially these comics in a way are, rather than them just telling it to you, you'll get to see it and experience in the comic. And I think it comes to life in a much stronger dramatic fashion than just having Garrus tell you how he became Archangel. So I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Generally, how long does it take you guys to write a comic?
Well, just like writing the game, it's a process. The first thing, I don't know how you did it, Dave. For us, it was essentially coming up with bullet points for each page. That for us, at least, is pretty easy. I usually just write out, okay, here are the cool things that I want to have happen in this comic, and then look at how many bullet points I got, and then go, all right, that probably takes 2 pages. That probably takes 3. I've got this many left over, so here's how she gets from here to here. That kind of thing. Then it goes off to descriptors, comes back with here's their attempt to bring it to light, and then essentially it's a back and forth process. That for us, I think it usually took a couple of months. Just kind of they would do a draft, we would go, okay, actually I think this would be a little more true to the IP. Then they do another pass on it, and then I would go through and do the kind of the Tally voice on it to make sure that okay, oh yeah, this sounds good. This sounds good. I changed this line here. So I'd say a few months revision-wise.
Sounds about fair.
I think my experience was about the same. Although for me it was write the whole story kind of longhand. So I wrote it out in narrative format with as much dialogue as I sort of put in, and then the scripter sort of took that and made a script out of it. Or ended up telling me like, "Oh my God, you wrote a 50-page comic." Oh, okay, well let's work with that, because that's the hard thing. And when you work in a video game, we're used to we go over budget. Okay, well then we go over budget, right? It's just longer. It just costs more. But with the comic, it's a hard and fast limit. You got 24 pages or 22, or like for me initially, it was the 12, and it's like, well, that's what you got. You can't go over that. Oh, all right. So then. It turned into a script, and then at that point it was the same, because then it just went back and forth over a period of a couple months.
Plus, with a comic, you find very quickly you can only have about one idea per page. So he might have, say, compressed his 50-page and tried to cram all those ideas in, but it wouldn't have worked. So you really got to sort of winnow it down to just one idea per page, because that's all comics can really visually deal with. So you have to be very economical.
So the scripters really butcher your project.
No,
I wouldn't say that.
Couldn't do it without them.
It's a different methodology, right? And the scripter, the one they paired with me, Alex Freed, he's done several comics before. He works for Bioware now, but he worked on the Knights of the Republic comic series, and so he was very familiar with the pacing that was required. So that was very handy, because it's not that they're butchering the idea; it's a translation, right? It's adapting it to the medium, and comics can tell very strong visual stories. They're cinematic in the way that our games are cinematic, but they have that nice narrative element as well. So if you can mix those two things correctly, you can tell a story that is very strong for a comic. And so you have to respect the medium. Right? That's what's important.
I think that's true whatever medium you're writing. And
Yes.
I remember when I went from tabletop role-playing games to writing video games. A tabletop role-playing game, I could say, okay, you go to the players could say, okay, today we want to go to this lord's fancy ball, and I could do that one by the seat of my pants and just go, great, there are these guys there, there are these guys there, there are these guys there, they're all from different countries. In a video game, that's incredibly expensive. It's a ton of characters, a ton of dialogue, a ton of different costumes. So that's really hard to do in a video game, really easy to do in tabletop. On the other hand, a big battle, is a whole lot of prep for me with, when I'm running it as a DM or something, as a tabletop game, it's pretty easy to just tell the level designers, big battle here, they will take that and run with it. Comics are the same way. You can tell, you could have a lot of talk during action. You know, how many, if you guys, you know, people who read comics, a lot of good fight scenes that have people talking for unrealistic lengths of time during those fights. Well, that's great, and there's no way we can do that in a video game, because every time we've tried to have people yelling back and forth during a video game, I mean, at least in Mass Effect, it's like, yeah, no, it's like, okay, I assume there was awesome banter happening, but I was using the Avenger at the time, so it's just really learning to play to the strengths of each medium, and that's what the scripter's there for.
Next question?
Sure. Are there any plans to bring other characters in the comics you guys want to see how successful?
Are there any plans to bring other characters from either Dragon Age or Mass Effect into comic books?
How about Dragon Age?
Well, we have the first comic series with Alistair, Varric, and Isabella. I know that's probably going to continue on to another series. Once that storyline is wrapped up, I'd love to see Zevran have his own series. There's that the story with him sort of dealing with the crows that is nicely percolating in the background. I'd love to visit that, but beyond that, I don't know. I think it depends. Like for Dark Horse too, the guys at Dark Horse they're such big fans and they're so great to work with. And I think it still boils down ultimately to is there demand for it, right? So if the fans buy the comics. So buy the comics. Then we get to continue working on it, because I've written some of the novels for Dragon Age, and each one of them is such a long haul and it's exhausting. And not to say that doing the comics is easier, but it's a shorter piece of work, so you can do it, and it's nice intensive work, but then it's done fairly quickly. So I found it more pleasant overall.
I'd say with Mass Effect, same thing. I mean, if there's a demand, we certainly are no shortage of ideas for what we could do.
Yeah, I mean, especially as you move away from Shepard, there's such a big universe out there. You know, I would love to do hard-boiled pulp crime on the Citadel. You know, give me just, you know,
Awesome.
Blasto. Obligatory Blasto comic. I think that could happen.
We actually talked about that. Yeah, there's all kinds of ideas. So it's a question of if there's demand. We have no shortage of characters we could turn into comics. Absolutely.
Sure. What other themes do you want to explore in the comics that maybe you couldn't do in the games? Themes, stories, ideas that maybe are more suited to that format that you would want to play with?
Well, so this is the Homeworlds series on Mass Effect. So I wouldn't say it's a theme. Well, that is the theme that connects them. It's the Homeworlds. So to some extent, where they're from plays a part in these comics to varying degrees in different ways. The other theme would just be telling that personal story about that character that you didn't get to see in the game. I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, again, you know, with the exception of a few minutes of Joker, you're in Shepard's body for the entirety of the trilogy, and just getting to see the effects of the Reaper invasion, or the effects of the attack on Eden Prime, or the effects of just day-to-day life. You know, what's it like being a Krogan who has left Tuchanka because, you know, you're never going to get with the fertile females, so you went off to be a mercenary? Like, what's that like? What's it like being in that guy's head? There are just so many stories that we can tell that, you know, that don't really fit for Shepard, but we could go lots of places with.
Yeah, for me, it's not so much themes, I guess, as places. I mean, every time in a video game you want to go somewhere new, it's a new level. If I take the story somewhere, I'm basically asking some of the level artists to spend weeks and weeks crafting a level for me, which they may not even have the tile sets for, and so you're sort of limited in that respect. So in a comic book, you could just go wherever you like, because it's just as much work as going anywhere else, right? So for me, it's like, oh, you mean I could just take the story to a quick jaunt to Vinter, no problem, you know? Have a whole story that takes place in the Fade. I wrote a comic that the entire comic took place in one prison cell. I'm like, you could not do that in a game, right? So I thought that it opens up a lot of opportunities. Yeah.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I think one more question, and I saw your hand was up.
This is more, of course, a Mass Effect series. I don't know if it's been asked before, but it's about the dark energy theory that was going around in the Mass Effect Is that going to be expanded on in later downloadable content for Mass Effect 3? Or is that just not big enough to make that build up? Because I know it's pretty huge in Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, we foreshadowed it in Mass Effect 2, and I think it ended up having to do with some of what powered the Crucible.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think we were as clear on that as we could have been, and hopefully that's something the ending DLC addresses a little more.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for coming out. The writers, David, John, and Patrick, are going to be hanging out. They'll be over on this side wall with the Mass Effect banner. If anybody has any questions or want to talk to them a little bit, we're going to be taking them off the stage, setting up with our Mass Effect team. We're going to be doing a demonstration of our upcoming Mass Effect 3 DLC for multiplayer. So stick around and take part in that.